black supremacy. And with this particular video, I want to talk about the sovereign citizens versus the United States government and politicians, or should I say politicians. And I want to deal with the matrix of the United States Constitution, or more so the application of the United States Constitution. I wish I could have came up with an easier title in order to express these ideas, but I had to use a title that I could come up with. Hopefully I can change it in the time of me recording this video. But what I want to talk about is how the convenient use of the Constitution, the elite's monopoly on the interpretation of the Constitution, and just the plasticity or the whimsical nature of the United States Constitution, if I might say. You got it on there saying we the people, but it should say we the government or we the elite. And why that is because the government is the only one who has the right to interpret the Constitution, which they tend to do in a way that's convenient to them. That it's so broad, even though it just seemed like a document that you could just read it, it says what it means what it say, that it's so broadly interpreted. And it's been interpreted differently based on situations and circumstances and based on the people that's interpreting it at that particular moment. But it ultimately, the government has the final say in the interpretation of the Constitution. And I'll just show that with sovereign citizens who make some very good arguments with the Constitution. These sovereign citizens typically try to push what it says in the Constitution to override state law and municipal law. They try to use the Constitution as a supreme law of the land, and which they do so efficiently and effectively. But their arguments are often challenged by the government, by government employees, law enforcement, judges. Their arguments are usually bat down. The hypocrisy here is now you see the government using the same argument that sovereign citizens use, or other patriotic groups. They use certain arguments. They use the Constitution in a way to try to push their agenda and the freedoms of what they want to do and the freedoms that they feel like they deserve according to the Constitution. But when they do it, it's looked at as, oh, you just misinterpreting it, you spinning it, you misapplying it. You can't do that. But when the government comes and do it, the same thing, and use the Constitution in the same way that the sovereign citizens use, when governments or politicians use it in that manner, then it's acceptable, it's right and exact. And I'll just give you an example right now with immigration. California saying they establishing sanctuary cities in order to protect illegal immigrants from deportation. There's no such thing as a sanctuary city in and of itself, but there's a body of state laws that prohibit police officers from executing laws in a way that will lead to the deportation of immigrants, or aiding in using their law enforcement positions as police officers to aid in the deportation of illegal immigrants. So these sanctuary cities have been set up to protect immigrants because they predominantly are composed of immigrants. There's more immigrants there than anything. So how could they possibly be against the majority of their residents? That wouldn't be democracy. If a state goes against the majority of its residents, how is that democratic? And a lot of these minorities voted for these politicians. It's not even really a democratic. It wouldn't be democratic for them to go against the minority immigrant communities, or the immigrants that are deeply connected and rooted in the minority communities. If you attack immigrants, you're ultimately going to end up attacking minorities, because they are the relatives of these minority groups that live in these so-called sanctuary cities that voted for these politicians. You're just tearing their families apart. You're ultimately attacking the minority citizens by attacking illegal immigration. This is why the cities have to try to offer some protection to the majority of people that help them get in office. It's a democracy. You have to represent the majority. But now these politicians are going at these sanctuary cities and governors and mayors and the people who's making up these laws to protect illegal immigrants. They're saying that what you're doing is unconstitutional. That you have an oath of office to protect the Constitution. Now, if that's the case, this is the same thing that the sovereign citizens have been saying all along. They talk about the Constitution being the supreme law of the land, and the oath of office of police officers and government employees is to protect the Constitution. But when they use it, it's bat down. And state law and different municipal law overrides the Constitution when it comes to sovereign citizens. But when it comes to politicians and the government, as the federal government, now you have an oath in office now. Now that federal law should trump state and municipal law when it comes to the government, but it shouldn't trump municipal law when it comes to we the people. That's a hypocrisy, and that shows the convenient application and interpretation of the Constitution for the elite and for the government, which proves that we live in a military state. While the Constitution may indicate that we have certain freedoms as a people, the way it is interpreted only gives more power to the government and puts all the power in the hands of the government and takes all the power from the hands of the people, the way the Constitution is interpreted. You might have the right interpretation of a sovereign citizen as a sovereign citizen, but it doesn't matter. It don't matter, because it's ultimately going to be interpreted by the government. And state law and municipal law will trump your constitutional rights every single time. When it comes to the right to travel, when it comes to a whole bunch of municipal laws and citations that are really unconstitutional, that go against your rights, you're going to lose. Because it's going to be interpreted in a way, and they're going to say, are you wrong? You crazy. You know, you're a cult leader. You're an extremist. Because you interpret it in a way that empowers you as an individual. But if they interpret it in a way to allow them to attack minorities and go at immigrant communities and extend the laws and extend the reach and the powers and the control of the federal government, now they're using the Constitution and they sound like sovereign citizens. So do you see the hypocrisy that I'm pointing to here? Do you see it? I mean, I just find that interesting. So the Constitution has been a document that's really is based on interpretation and who's interpreted and their attitude and their emotion and how they feel and what office and what position they is and how they feel that day. That's what the Constitution is. It is unconstituted. The Constitution is unconstituted. That's why they don't have to write another one. You would think with the whole gun control thing and we having a right to bear arms and children getting shot down and murdered in the schools, that they would say, wait a minute, maybe we need to look at that gun amendment again. The Fourth Amendment. Maybe we need to look at the Fourth Amendment again. Because children are getting murdered. Because there's too many guns out here in the streets. Let's rewrite the Constitution. Every state and every country rewrites their Constitution at some point. When a Constitution does not reflect the desires of the masses of the people, then they have to rewrite the Constitution or write something else into the Constitution or amend it. Change it. They won't change it. No matter how many children get shot down in schools, no matter how much the Fourth Amendment gets out of control in this country, they will not change the Constitution. They are a slave to their forefathers. Are they a slave to the founding fathers of this country? Is the human race today a slave to the ideology of the founding fathers of this country? Can we think a new thought and set up a society or construct that is more consistent with the way we want to see the world today? I mean, that's a real question. Why not change the laws? But see, they don't have to change the laws because they've mastered manipulating the document. So they can make it do, as the federal government and as government employees and law enforcement, they can make the Constitution do tricks. They can make it do what they want it to do when they want it to do it. It's just you who are limited to the political powers and to the law enforcement officials that are in front of you. You're limited to their interpretation of the law. You're limited to their interpretation, as though you didn't go to school and you can't read and you can't interpret or comprehend the words of the Constitution for yourself. Your interpretation in their book means absolutely nothing. I had to go in on this. This King Noble Black Supremacy. Join my website, www.kingnobleuncensored.com. Donate and don't hate.